She doesn't know everyone's names, so if you can help her out and say your name before you speak.
I'll start. My name is Paul. I prefer he, him, and his. And I'm doing liaisons to the
Hi everyone, I'm Aaron Apple. I'm a senator for he, him, and his, second year, and I'm city liaison and committee appointments coordinator.
Hi, I'm Vernon, he, him, and his, second year.
Hey, I'm Peter. I'm he and his, and I'm a third year. I am the treasurer of Senate.
Hi, I'm Eliza, she, her, and hers, and I am here from Journalism Living.
Hey, I'm Harrison. I'm second year, he and his, and I'm outreach coordinator.
Do we need to go back that way
Yeah,
first?
probably should.
I'm Anders.
I mean, she.
I'm Matt. He, him, his.
She, her, hers.
Julia.
I'm Kayla.
I'm the Allen
My name is Miguel. Class of 2013. I was a senator a couple years back, and my preferred gender pronouns are between the kids.
Chris.
Maya was
Ariana, she, her, hers.
Cassie, she, her, hers.
So Pleasant, she, her, and hers in the second year. Roxy, she, her, and hers.
Tim, he, him, his.
Lila, she, her, hers.
Peter, he, him, his.
Emma, she, her, hers.
Wait, also. Mia, second year, associate liaison. I like she, her, hers.
I'm Mahmoud, I'm a second year, she, him, and his, and I'm the...
Hi, I'm Hope. I prefer she, her, and hers, and I'm outreach coordinator and city liaison. Julia, she, her, hers.
Zia, he, him, his, second year, and I'm the chartering liaison for Senate.
Sarah, she, her, hers.
Second year.
Ari, no PGPs, third year. South Campus liaison.
Kiki, they've been theirs. He, him, his is also fine. I'm a second year and South Campus liaison.
Hi, I'm Lauren. I use she, her, and hers. I'm a fourth year, and I'm the Senate-appointed SFC co-chair. Hi, I'm Miliaku. I'm a second year. I'm new. I'm the new SFC committee coordinator, and I'm sort of excited to be taking notes today.
Eric, he, him, and his.
Ashley, she, her, hers.
There were a couple people who trickled in, so if you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself.
Ty, he, him, his.
Is that everyone? Alright, so next we're going to go to the approval of the agenda that's not all the way on the board yet.
Sorry, I'm adding institutional memory task force and referendum update right here.
Is there anything that anyone wants to add to the agenda?
Can I add election update? It's set.
I know, Justin sent out an email about
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
What's it called? Points of respect?
Yeah.
those questions. Hard decisions.
Yeah, right?
I think that the institutional memory task force should be in decisions because it's going to have another one to propose a creation of. So I feel like that'd be a deciding thing.
Okay. What's your name?
Eric.
Oh, I do that. Okay.
That's fine. General feelings about the agenda?
Does outside business need to, if there's outside business, do they need to like say who they
I
are?
don't believe they do, but they can put
Just
what they
checking.
want on the agenda if they
We
want.
want to keep it back to the chartering.
What's your name, sorry?
The chartering
Me.
for the food organization. Okay.
Your name?
Mia. Sorry.
Okay.
Lila.
Yeah. Oh.
Outside
She was
business.
just saying that she's the outside business.
Yeah.
One of them.
The outside business.
Outside business.
So you can like put up, like if you have like something that you want us to know on the thing, but we also will just address outside business first. So just keep in mind like during outside business time, just like speak up or address it then. Instead of everything.
Speak up. That'd be great.
General feelings about the agenda today? Alright, moving on to outside business.
I have outside business as well, but you
Okay.
first, please.
Hi, to your family responsible investing organization, back again. We just wanted to talk to you all about the committee that we're forming. We had talked about it the last time you were here. We had our policy symposium. It was really great. Thank you to any of you who showed up. It was really wonderful. And so now we're taking what we came from that symposium and forming committees to write a formal proposal that we will be submitting to the board that will be applied to the social justice scholarship, which we've talked, I can tell you more about at a different time. It's already been approved. We know that Senate has a lot of students who are really involved and know a lot about how the school works, and anyone who would come to Plenary is also pretty involved and great. And so you should apply to be on our committee. I can put an email address up, and you guys should email if you're interested in joining, and we will send you the application. And who is in charge of the committee?
I guess I'm a little here.
We can set up meetings
Yeah.
to talk about how it would work.
What's your name?
It's RIO .Oberlin @gmail.com. Do you guys have anything you want to add? And if you're interested in real general interest meeting again soon.
Leela,
Yes,
clarify that's not EDU, right?
No, it's Gmail.
just gmail.com.
It's at Gmail.
Okay. What's your name?
I'm Leela.
Thanks.
Is that everything for that topic? Should we move on to the next outside business?
Yes, I'm listening.
Okay, Matt, I agree, next outside.
Hi everybody, I'm Matt. I'm here from the Student Honor Committee. We've had a lot of discussion over the past week about the Honor Committee, and in the future we envision sending you guys another class of recruits before the year is out. So to prevent the same kind of conflicts between our bodies and between the same kind of misinformation from being presented, I'd like to go over a little bit about our process and answer any questions you guys might have about how we work. So we did send a few letters before. I have a copy here of the letter that I published in the review and sent to Student Senate if you guys would like to take a look at that here. And we also have, just a second. Oh darn, I might have forgotten one. We have an email exchange between our coordinator, Hillary Mullen, and Rachel Manning, but I don't think it's in the today. Anyway, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Honor Committee and how we receive cases and then how we process them. So, within the Students' Rights and Responsibilities Handbook, which is available online, but I also have a copy here if anybody would like to take a look at that. It lays out the process for bringing a case before the Honor Committee. Any faculty or student can bring a complaint before the Honor Committee. To do that, there is a file that is downloadable from the Student Honor Committee website, I think as well as just the Oberlin.edu website. That file is then passed to Hillary Mullen, our coordinator. In it, the complainant addresses the principles of the violation, i.e. what the situation was, how the respondent or the student violated that, as well as explaining sort of their side of the story. They might also request informal resolution or not. Generally, we don't grant informal resolution to anything that is other than a misunderstanding, like a clear misunderstanding between two people. If anyone would like to look at rights and responsibilities, I have this here, but it's available online. So after that happens, Hillary assigns 2 case managers to each respondent. These case managers are supposed to act as advocates with the respondent, supposed to help them present their case and really try to help them feel as comfortable as possible within the honor system. And it's not a comfortable thing to be facing charges of academic dishonesty, but quoted in the review March 14th, 2014 in a letter to the editor by Aidan Appel. A student senator said that people might face charges of expulsion based on their cases awaiting a hearing. This is not the case. Expulsion is in living memory hasn't been caused by the honor committee. That would be for something like a third offense or an offense that involved bullying, intimidation, and often those go straight to J-board rather than coming to us, as far as I know. So once the two case managers are assigned, they attempt to make contact as frequently as possible, or as soon as possible, with the respondent. The respondent often answers on time, but occasionally does not. If the respondent does not reply, the coordinator, Hillary, can send a letter to their OCMR or send a more formal sort of email. The purpose of the initial contact is to set up an informal meeting at which the rights and responsibilities of the respondent are discussed. So that would be two case managers as well as the respondent. And if there are multiple respondents in a case, if it's, for example, an issue of collaborating illegally on a paper, I've seen as many as 6 respondents on one case. That's one meeting with each respondent individually to go over with them, learn their side of the story, ask them the questions that might help them in front of the formal hearing, get any misinformation out of the way, and be an open resource and an educational resource. One of the things that we try to do during the committee is go over how these kinds of situations might be avoided in the future. That might be as simple as pointing them to an online citation guide, such as the one Steve Volk provides for the history department. That's available on the history department website. Another might be to point them towards the Writing Center, encourage them in the future to email professors if they have questions, or email the honor committee if they have questions about what they're doing constitutes a violation of the honor code or not. In addition to that, we might suggest things like software that can check your paper for unintentional plagiarism. If you, for example, left out a quote, left out a citation, that's not something that anybody wants to see in front of the honor committee because it's an honest mistake, but it will come in front of us if the professor so chooses. So we have to point them towards those tools. Next, we schedule a hearing. At this hearing, there are 5 members of the honor committee, the respondent, and if the respondent chooses, they can bring along someone for moral support or to help them ask the right questions, to remind them of what they want to say. This person can be anyone from the Oberlin College community, but they may not address the panel directly. They can only speak with the respondent. The respondent addresses us directly. The one exception is no attorneys are permitted because it's not a legally binding affair in there. At this hearing, it is recorded. We ask the student various things. One of the things might be, because we're on such low numbers, is whether or not they consent to a 4-person hearing panel. The results are effectively the same. In a 5-person hearing, to make any decision, we have to have 4 out of the 5 members agree. And actually, I've never seen a case where everybody didn't agree. We are a consensus-building organization. If someone doesn't feel comfortable with the decision, someone doesn't feel comfortable with the kind of questions we ask, or with the kind of answers that we're given, they are encouraged to speak up, and we'll go at it until we get consensus. But because we only have 6 members on the honor committee right now, we often have this form, which you guys can take a look at. So that's signed by the case managers and the SHC coordinator as well as the respondent. We proceed then to hear the respondent's side of the case. The respondent is welcome to bring a prepared statement. We also ask, as case managers, the sort of questions such as whether or not something was premeditated, whether or not something was out of extreme stress or peer pressuring, so that we understand the mitigating circumstances behind violating the honor committee. After the student has given their statement and presented their side of the story, we review materials with them. The professor often sends us the materials, well, has to send us the materials and questions so that we can construct any kind of hearing. We look over it, and we hear their side of the story to everything. The professor is not present in any of these hearings because we feel that would be a conflict of interest and would be intimidating to the respondent. So they are explicitly not permitted to be there. However, in certain cases where we find the professor's statement to be unclear or misleading, And increasingly now we've decided to make this a more regular part of the process. The case managers will meet with the professor and hear vocally the professor and ask some of the questions that the respondent brought up in our informal meeting. Once the respondent is totally sated, we allow them to ask us as many questions, get in contact with us as often as possible. They're escorted from the room. We come back and we decide to vote. The first thing we vote on is whether or not the respondent is responsible for violating the honor committee. Not necessarily did they violate the honor code. How many of us have forgotten to sign the pledge at the bottom of the paper in exam? Like, that's all a violation of the honor code. So everybody has probably violated, whether or not it was intentional and there were resources available to help, whether or not the student made a diligent effort to avoid violating the honor code is what we're looking for. So if we do find them responsible of violating the honor code, we then assign a sanction based on this rubric right here. You can pass around. It's measured in community service hours there. In addition to that, the mitigating circumstances, we have a variety more that we would consider, and we can be, in terms of mitigating circumstances, we can be much more liberal in our application than we can in terms of the violations of the honor code. So you'll see as that comes around, it's measured in community service hours, but those are converted often to more educational sorts of sanctions, such as writing a reflection essay on the event, writing an essay about citations. However, if the student, for example, has difficulty with English, as a lot of people in our system do, we try to avoid things that would cause further difficulty or cause further stress that is undue, above and beyond what would be expected of any other student. So here we have sort of the case that's filled out, everything that's considered. You can take a look at that yourself. Once we've made our decision, that's passed on to the Faculty Honor Committee. The Faculty Honor Committee cannot cancel our decision, deny our decision. They may either approve it or they may ask us questions. In the grand majority of cases, they simply approve our decision. I can remember, I think, maybe once or twice this year that we got sent back with questions, and after we answered them to their satisfaction, it was simply approved and sent on to the dean of the college. The dean of the college then goes through, records it in the college's official record book, and passes it on. But there's a few things that we need to understand here. Just because it is recorded by the college does not mean that the honor violation is visible to anybody. First violations, as a matter of principle, are always internal violations. That is to say, if you apply to graduate school, if you apply to a job that wants to see your transcript, if you apply to Fulbright, for example, that wants to see your official transcript, nothing regarding your honor code violation is present on there. Second and third violations are external, so those would be present. But as a matter of principle, we want to give people second chances, we want to be educational, so we don't take punitive measures against them. In cases where a second or third violation does occur, our rubric is actually increased. We often try to make things still educational, but let them understand that this is a serious case, that this is, at Oberlin we take the honor code very seriously, and in those cases might result in suspension, though, again, I haven't seen a case that resulted in suspension since my first year on the honor committee in 2011. After the dean approves it, it's sent to the student then has an amount of time in which to complete the sanction, send it back to us, and then the matter is over, it's dropped. But because of the sort of logjam between the Faculty Honor Committee and the Dean, it takes about 2 weeks between the end of our hearing and the final decision for that sort of to go through the process. Another reason we're having trouble is with only 6 members out of the ideally 30 that we would have, it takes often months, if not weeks, to find a time that suits everybody, to sort out the case, to schedule a hearing and make sure everybody's assured. So right now, we heard, earlier today, we heard cases from October or December, and it's March, and so we need to keep moving, and we need more members. As far as the basis of our cases, the majority of them are understandings, or a lot of them come from English as a second language learners who are unfamiliar with citation, unfamiliar with academic integrity in the Western sense, and as a result, we do try to make people comfortable in that situation. So, for example, I speak Mandarin and Japanese and Spanish and French and German and Italian. And if people have problems communicating in English and they speak any of those languages, I provide translation in those cases. Although historically that has been less and less necessary as time goes on, which I think is a testament to the quality of the English as a second language program here at Oberlin. Another thing we do at the beginning of the year, we try to promote education. Of course, we have our standard orientation time talk that very few people, I think, pay attention to. I'm not even sure that all the people who say they attended actually did. But I personally run an educational session for international students to try and help them reach out to resources that they otherwise might not know are available, such as the Writing Center, such as even emailing the professor, which often is very intimidating, even for students raised in the American educational system. This was a year that was particularly successful with that. I think I had about 40 international students, which is a record. And we've seen cases from international students decline precipitously because of that. Another thing I'd like to talk about is the influence of faculty or administration in our process. The number one thing I'd like to say is that at no point is any administrator involved in deciding whether a student is responsible for violating an honor code. And to my knowledge, nor is it possible for an administrator to report a student to the honor committee. Because of that, our administrative oversight is very minimal. We're given a very free hand, and since we try to advocate for students, I feel that is an appropriate sort of tack on the part of the administration. As to faculty, obviously faculty are the people who turn in cases, but at no point are they given any rights regarding the decision. As I mentioned, the faculty honor committee cannot deny our decision, cannot overturn it. They can only ask us about it if they disagree with it. And furthermore, I forgot to mention that when the case is passed to the Faculty Honor Committee, as you might see in sort of the form that we use passed around, no names are involved whatsoever. It's simply a case number, our decision, and several small sort of extraneous facts about the student, such as whether or not they're in the conservatory or the college, such as whether or not this is an internal or external violation. So what I'd like to say is that I think a lot of what the debate that's been going on here as to whether or not we represent the students was caused from misinformation, was caused from an unfamiliarity with our own process, and that in the future I would really, really like it if we could work together to get these kind of students, have interviews together, do outreach together. We tried to do outreach on our own. We emailed every single department asking them to send an email to their majors to get them involved with us. We emailed freshman RAs in the FYSP program. We asked professors to send us recommendations of their students, and we just did a student list email as well. So theoretically, every student should have gotten an email, but our total yield in terms of that outreach effort was only 7 applicants. Then we had an honor committee member recruit 2 more freshmen that were friends to apply as well. So obviously our influence is not very large on campus, and we really like help reaching out to people who might otherwise not know about the honor committee or not consider it a part of their everyday lives and important. So I had a meeting with Ariana about that a few weeks ago. That went well, and we're planning to do coordinated outreach to La Alianza Latina. But if anybody else is influential within groups on campus that you feel should be on the honor committee, should be represented there, we highly encourage you to coordinate with us on that matter so that we can get the kind of people that you want to see on this committee in there with us. Another thing that I'd like to do is schedule our meetings in coordination. If you read the student rights and responsibilities, there's supposed to be 3 senators and 3 honor committee members at every interview, and then as a group we vote, majority decides who's on the honor committee and who's not. Because in recent years that hasn't been the case, I think that has been overlooked. So when I was recruited, for example, there was 1 senator in the room and 4 honor committee members. The senator, I don't think, asked me any questions or really paid attention at all. And then I served a year and then went abroad, and I think during the point that I was abroad, the Senate sort of stopped interviewing with us together, which is why we continued without consulting the Senate when we were doing our recruiting process, because we felt that this was something that you guys maybe had been uninformed about or given release control. So we would like to reinstitute working together and do our interviews together. And hopefully with this outreach effort, we can get a functioning audit committee. Another thing that was sent out a few days ago, I received an email from Student Senate that said we only had 6 available seats. We have, at this point, 21 available seats because all 6 of the current honor committee members are graduating seniors. So the people that you guys just approved will be, so actually we have 22, will be the only people that are still on the committee next semester. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any outside business, or should we move on with our agenda?
I just want to thank Matthew for coming and sharing. Again, like, what a big misunderstanding was look, he just did his research into the handbook and found that, yeah, we're supposed to do these interviews together. That is the work that Senate's supposed to be doing to make sure that we know what we're responsible for. And if we go back to 2 plenaries ago, I believe it was well, we haven't, Mahmoud and somebody else, I don't remember who was saying, oh, well, we haven't really done this in the past. We kind of just, let them do it, and we trust them. And clearly somebody has taken the time to go through the bylaws or the handbook and figure out exactly what we're supposed to do, which is conduct these interviews together. And I need to everybody here should be thankful for Matthew actually doing his work and not just speaking under assumptions. Again, this is something that comes up over and over again, which is senators sit here and say, well, this is how things have gone. I think these are the bylaws. No, again, Kiki and I's instinct, and we're still getting flack about this, about, coming here and saying, no, we should really think about doing our jobs as senators. And meanwhile, we still get flack from the community being oh, you guys are so unproductive. You guys you guys just want to hold up Senate. This is an example of somebody doing their homework, coming in, being clear about what he needs from us, and we should, thank you so much. That's work that we're supposed to be doing, not just meandering around ideas about efficiency and moving forward. Let's go back to what we're supposed to be doing, and thank you, and let's do everything we can in the next couple of weeks to make sure that Senate has 3 people at these meetings that are going to be going, and that there are 3 of y'all there, and that we do what we're supposed to be doing. And again, just another example of here's the student body keeping us accountable, and thank you. And again, just another moment to self-reflect on what going off of your instincts or efficiency purposes does to delegitimize what we do here as a Senate. That's it.
Aaron?
Yeah, going off of that, I think this is a good, well, I'm going to bring this up more later when we talk about the institutional memory task force. I think we should start making a concerted effort for the future to make sure like these things are more noticeable, and like I'm a committee appointments coordinator. I should have known like that fast. So I thank you for bringing it up, and I look forward to like actually working with you for the next batch of people. But yeah, like, we just need to start focusing on institutional memory, because if we keep like coming back here and like getting new positions and not knowing what the heck we're supposed to do, like we're not going to get anything done. It's kind of like a waste of everybody's time and student money. So let's like make an effort for that in the future.
I and a couple other senators met with Matthew and a few other people from the student honor communities past week, and it was really insightful. Also, like when you mentioned, I don't know, I just think as senators, like, we should think about what we say before we say it, because it was like the thing that was being pushed that, oh, like this needs to be a rush process because like people are going to get expelled and blah, blah, blah. Like some of those like academic careers at risk and stuff like that, and those assumptions being made, or like just like, I don't even know if they were assumptions as much as they were like trying to like sway us into not like doing the interviews. Like think about like the purpose behind what would be the point in saying that? What would be the point in whether it was actively or inactively lying about that? And I'm specifically not saying these names. I don't want any specific senator to feel attacked, but I think the senator who said it knows who they are, and like just be conscious of like what you say. Don't like don't make up things so that you can like sway the body of Senate to vote one way or the other. Like, because like Matthew said, like that's not something that the honor committee is responsible for, and that's something that I found out after talking to Matthew, and that like those like in the student there's like a lot of students who still have to go through process through the student honor committee, but like let's not like elevate the like urgency of the situation simply to get a sway in votes, and I think that's important to note. But yeah, thank you, Matthew.
Is there anyone else who would like to get on staff to speak about this issue? Alright, we'll move on to announcements. Lauren.
So not every senator filled out the when is good for the Senate SFC meeting tomorrow night. Tentatively, it is at 6 tomorrow night, but can anyone not make it? Yeah.
How long is it projected to go?
30 minutes? 45 minutes, I guess, depending on how
6
much.
is okay then.
So, other than you three, everyone else can make it?
Jesse.
Jesse can't make it. Because 12 more people. Okay. I think we'll do, I don't know, I can find a room in Wilder. Yeah.
I think I just wanted to say the reason we wanted to have everyone there is because we want to talk about SFC appointments, and like, I mean, similar to honor committee appointments, this is something that Senate should be highly involved in because SFC does a lot of work that has a lot of impact on campus. And I don't know, as co-chair, I was a little disappointed to see that a lot of senators didn't come to any of our meetings, and that is something that is in your bylaws that you've been reminded of. It's not something that was an issue of institutional memory. And like, we understand things come up, and so we're trying to accommodate people, and hopefully this meeting will, answer questions as we go into that. So I guess since we had a chance to talk to you guys, you want to talk to us individually, those who can't make it, but if everyone else can make it.
Who should we reach out to? You were.
Whoever's easiest. Awesome.
Does anyone else have any announcements? Alright, we'll move on to office hour report. I have personal leave on there.
Okay, so I have heard about Res Ed having a 6-semester in residence policy to get off-campus housing. And if you go on personal leave, it doesn't count as a semester in residence. And I mean, I had one student who got in touch with me about, I think Mock, you got this email too, had been working for a year. He left Oberlin, went and worked for a year, and did 2 semesters at a community college, and is now coming back to Oberlin and is unable to get off-campus housing because of that. And in addition, there's a rule that if you're 23, you can get off-campus housing. He turns 23 on February 7th, but their rule is it has to be by January 2nd, so he's being denied that. On top of that, I think that it is a huge problem that students who might be having serious health or mental illness issues, that they have to leave campus, that they would then be basically punished for that. And I had a friend who was having serious health issues. She had to leave campus. She had a house off campus with her friends, and they revoked her privilege of that. And I think that to have someone coming back from campus and be unable to live with their friends after they might have been having a rough time is a huge problem. And I don't know what ideas y'all have about how we can talk to Res Ed about this, because I find this incredibly unfair.
I think maybe we should start by like finding out technical reasons why why the school makes this policy, outside of just being like careless and like thoughtless in the ways of taking policies for students, and just like talk with like is there any like specific reason, and then how can we like work around that to like maybe accommodate students in that policy.
Yeah, I think we should, if you want to meet outside and like, because this is a social justice issue, again, like people who, I have a friend who's off campus right now, will be for the next semester, and like again, coming back to campus is going to be hard for this person, and they're going to need to be in the support of their friends. They're also going to be like semesters behind the class that they came in with, meaning like even more of the reason why they need to like go off campus, because those are the people that they are going to know are the people who are already off campus or like old enough to be up. So it's just like there's so many reasons why like that accommodation needs to be made, and I think that we should draft a resolution and pass it next plenary. It's spring break, never mind. But well, I don't know. Can we pass resolutions over?
Yes.
So I think we should try to pass it this week over and just have a vote, just to show Res that we're kind of serious. Like actually, like what have we done this semester yet? Like let's pass a resolution. Let's at least meet with Adrian Bautista or like somebody who like is a little bit oriented and like Sean Leibleich is like okay too sometimes. So maybe we should sit down with both of them and like consider this from a social justice angle, consider this from like a student interest angle, pass a resolution, do something about it. This is like affects so many students. Yeah, thanks for bringing it up.
Sorry.
Yeah, going off of that, I'm like really pleasure about it myself, because I've been like talking with my supervisor, the resident, trying to figure out my living situation next year because my best friend's gone right now. So I would love to like have a conversation in a group about this and like talk about this. I like what you said about like doing our research about this before we make hasty decisions, but this is a pretty big issue, so I'd be down to talk about it.
Lauren?
Can I get a show of hands of which senators would want to meet this week to talk about it? I'll send an email.
Is there any other officer reports that needs to Nope.
Beyond me.
Beyond.
I wasn't clear on when outside business was over or not. Would you mind if I had a quick thing?
No. I guess we have to take general feelings. General feelings about reopening outside business. All right, Deanna.
Thanks. That wasn't bad. So Zia and I brought Chris Cass to talk about, had the two workshops, so why many feminism and the anti-racist politics and organizing white communities. I was happy to see that one of you were there. You know who you are, Karen Pell. So I thank you for that. There are some people on Senate that don't need to be at either one of those events. So that I'm not bringing that up for those of you, and you also know who you are. But I just wanted to kind of point out that Chris Crass was like intentionally brought to address a certain population on this campus, and to have senators that are representative of those groups and to have them not attend those events, whether it's for half an hour, 10 minutes, 3 hours, or anything between that, is discouraging because we work really hard to bring people who reflect different places, and like that's something that we told SFC that we were doing, is that like it wasn't just like a tokenized POC being like, do like anti-racist work. It was someone that comes from communities like some of the people on Senate, and to not have y'all there was hard. I know it's midterms, I know that there are a lot of reasons and other applications that people have, but I also think that there has to be some kind of effort made. I know that some people like can communicate personally, like I'm not able to go for so and so reason, and that like that is also valuable. So just like being accountable to things that like your student body is bringing to you for that purpose is really helpful if you attend. So I was a little bit frustrated with that, and so next time I would appreciate some more representation so that one person or a few people don't have to carry that kind of responsibility and weight in Senate.
Alright. Yeah, thank you. Moving on to committee reports. Chartering.
It's me.
Zia.
So the joint chartering subcommittee met a couple weeks ago to discuss how, I guess, ideas on how to reformat the entire chartering process altogether. Because last semester, when the flute organization's charter was brought forth, there was a lot of concern among members of Senate, at least 3 members of Senate, including myself, who said that they felt as if student funds going towards an organization that was attempting to kind of supplement areas in which the con or college doesn't provide resources doesn't seem like a good way to spend student funds, especially since it would only benefit members of that organization, whereas organizations that are chartered are supposed to offer opportunities for all members of campus. So that sparked a big discussion about, kind of reforming how we look at the chartering process altogether. And then the people that attempted to charter the flute organization are interested in getting it actually chartered and reformatting or editing the initial charter. And I was just wondering if senators would be interested in passing the charter pending a specific amendment I added to the charter, which I'll read right now. Initially, the charter said that part of the student activity fund for this group would go towards maintaining upkeep for instruments and stuff, and I basically amended it so the only thing funding will go towards are public events or events that can offer opportunities for the public. So I added a point, and this is what it states. Funding will not go towards supplies, for example, tuners, metronomes, tools that improve breathing techniques, instrument upkeep, or any other areas that supplement areas in which college and conservatory departments do not provide services. So basically, this is my attempt to, I guess, make sure that student funds are going to resources that are available to every student and not just kids that play flute. So.
Did you talk to the Flute Association about these changes?
I emailed them. I haven't gotten a response yet, but I know that Tina, who is the faculty member on the Joint Chartering Subcommittee, wanted me to propose these possible amendments and see if Senate would be interested in passing it pending this amendment.
So I was at the meeting with you.
Right.
But we shouldn't make a move on this until the Flute Association agrees to the changes in their charter, because it's their charter, and we need to be respectful of that. So this is also part of a much bigger conversation. I was at the also the policy meeting for SFC last Wednesday and talked about it then. So I don't know. I'd like to also talk about that in general, but I'll use my time.
Hey.
I think you should.
I just want to make the point that I'm not saying we should amend the charter now. I'm just saying that I'm asking if there'd be interest in passing it pending some type of amendment like this.
So the question for senators is, with this, after talking to this charter, the group that wants to be chartered, will we vote yes on that?
It's pending an actual change to the charter that I wrote.
Right.
That says that student funds won't be used for maintaining instrument upkeep.
So assuming they agree, we're trying to gauge how senators vote.
Could you send us the actual?
Yeah. part that I changed is in red for the record.
In the documents, it's red.
Yeah, or it should be.
Oh,
is it not? All right.
Red.
All right, under Article 5, Finances, point 4, and the fourth point under Activities.
Oh, it's forward.
There you go, yeah.
I have Aaron on second.
Yeah, I mean, assuming that they say it's okay, so kind of as the chartering meeting, we sort of opened up like Pandora's box of like, well, this doesn't really necessarily only apply to the conservatory, but like there's also college, departments, like the dance department, capoeira, like that's a club that gets SFC funds, but there's also like the dance department class, and like how does that work? So in the interest of like not completely dismantling that as it is, and like affecting all those other groups, I wouldn't be opposed to chartering this on the grounds that we also continue and like really engage in more of a dialogue around like department funds versus SFC funds.
I think SFC would really want to keep that conversation with you all as well.
Harrison?
So if this does pass, and the funding won't go towards supplies, well, how will they get the supplies exactly?
I mean,
okay, yeah.
I mean the groups for people that play flute are interested in like, I mean, I guess the assumption is people that are joining the flute organization already play flute, or if they want to learn. I personally just don't think like funding should go towards like public. And it's not just me either. It's members of the subcommittee too that I was talking to, that it shouldn't go towards instruments for a specific group. It's like.
Is this just a purely language question? You have in there the, or any other areas that supplement areas in which college and conservatory departments do not provide services. Does that mean, like this is just really technical languagey stuff, does that mean that you'll supplement areas that the college and conservatory also supplement? Or just they can't have funding towards that at all?
I mean, generally what the funding is supposed to go towards, and I said this before, is if the group endorses and kind of presents and promotes events that are available to the general public. So I'm not exactly sure like in what area they would. I mean, I guess the school does welcome certain speakers or certain events, so I guess in that way it's supplementing that. But it's, I don't know, it's generally the rule of thumb is events that are for the public. Yeah.
Could you just change that language to state that the group or the SFC, I don't know who this is really applying for, just will not get funding for whatever tools and supplies and equipment that is for personal flute playing?
I mean, sure.
I mean, just to make the language clear.
Alright.
I think the language is fine. It's pretty clear as you can see it. But also, I just want to in my opinion, there's something very different about bringing speakers and doing flute breath related. I'm a conservatory student. I know that there's a huge difference. I don't think bringing academics is to come speak on their topics of specialty is comparable really to bringing it's essentially bringing, I don't really know how to explain it, but it's almost like bringing a private tutor. It's different, bringing a speaker for an event, an academic to speak, for a department, Africana studies, anthropology, sociology speaker, and bringing like somebody who's going to give like a master class on flute. Like a master class is like, I don't know if there are any con students here, but like it's like it's like one-on-one tutoring. That's like what a master class is, you know? You'll have a studio, maybe 10 people will be there, and you'll get up and play, and the person that's brought in will like literally work through what you just played. Like that's what those aren't public events. Like people aren't going to benefit from, like I have gone to master classes, not played, and have benefited, but the language is so, and the sort of approach and culture of these like specific events are so like for your studio. Like it's so explicit. So I wouldn't go so far as to make comparisons about when we bring speakers, because like everybody, given, like if you're there and listening, like you'll get something from it, but like these are literally like bringing, like master classes, breathing technique, all of that stuff is literally just like, I want to bring in a tutor, you know, or like this expert. So I just think that that's like really different. I just wanted to clarify why with the conservatory and specifically related to funding going through studios, it's like, in my opinion, just from my experience as a con student, it's different. And that's why, like, when I was at the first meeting for the chartering of this, I immediately was like, nah, like you would never see a poster in Wilder saying, like, come to this, like, flute event, you know? Like, you don't see that. So, like, let's not even front. Like, these events are open to the public, but they're not really open to the public. You know what I mean? It's not for the larger campus. And that's why this one is, like, trickier than most, I think.
I have myself on stack next. I guess since we have some people here who are on SFC, I guess if you were brought with an issue of an organization that was clearly predominantly conservatory students and they would give benefit that would be specifically to a small group on campus, how would you go about like allocating the funds?
He's looking at you.
Yeah.
We talked about this once there.
Yeah. I mean, this is definitely something we've been thinking about a lot, and like, I definitely think, Ari, to your point, there are a lot of, it's very different in the college, but there are certain things like you brought up the dance department, for example. There was a request for some silks to be used in a performance of someone's senior recital, and like, so a senior recital is something you do for credit. So like maybe there was the argument that the dance department should be funding all materials that are used for credit, but then this person requesting said, you know, this is something that will be available to all students for the rest of the silk's lifespan, I guess, and anyone theoretically would have access to using this anywhere on campus. So there are certain comparable things in the college that we also are grappling with, and it's this idea, like often of like things that you get credit for, the institution that provides the credit should be supporting you in that way. And so like whatever the language is in the charter, if you do appoint a good SFC, hopefully we would, you know, you could trust us in making this decision and making sure that all funds are totally accessible. But like you also bring up a good point, Ari, of like student outreach. Like we can give them money for posters, but are they going to put them in Wilder or just put them in the con? That's not something we necessarily have power over. That's something that should be expressed to students when they receive funding for possible exclusive events. But okay, I got on tangent. Your question was that how do we think about questions like this?
Yeah.
So I guess, that's the things we look at. We look at if they're accessible, like your question about, you know, what if someone who doesn't play flute wants to go to this flute master class, they don't own a flute, and they never have, like, can they go to the college to get access to a flute and like tuning things? Should that be something that's provided to increase the accessibility of flute? That's another thing we think of. We haven't come to a consensus about it. It's a really hard issue. So and like also knowing like when you charter something, is it going to be cost effective? Like is providing flutes to create the flute, to make the flute club as accessible as possible, like committing to making it accessible in providing the supplies to participate in this group if it were chartered, is that something that you guys want to open the door to? Is something you need to think about as well. Yeah, I don't know, Lauren, do you have anything to add?
No, I think you covered it.
Yeah, I think when we talked about this before, like I think the question of like once a group is chartered, like they can get like a budget for the semester, for the year, and kind of like once the budget is set, like they have kind of free reign over what they do with that money. And the concern is with like this group being chartered, will they like I guess expend those funds on things that like only they can benefit from, and how would they like? Because like any group can I guess can go like ad hoc and like, oh, like we want to like put on this event, or like we want like money for these posters, blah blah blah. So, like once it's chartered, they're like allocated like a budget. All right, any of the SFC members can speak to this. And so like that was our concern, like at least that was my concern as regards like budgeting. How would you take into account like the ability of this group to like be open to like the public as regards like what we know now, even with the amendment to the if it was chartered and budget stuff.
Is that a question?
Yeah, I'll address it tomorrow.
Yes. It was not well formed. Okay. So should I rephrase it?
So you're asking about like how do we think about groups' openness and accessibility in making funding decisions?
As regards like for well, this charter, it can get like an actual budget that once it's like a budget is given, you have like pretty much like free reign over what you do for money.
Yeah.
So like in the I think specifically speaking to this group, I guess, what would be like the thought process behind allocating like that budget with the concerns that have been brought up so far?
I think too, we had a few ad hocs from them, and what was one of the compromises that was good is I think they had a performer who was going to give, I don't know if it was a performance and a master class and private lessons, but it was something where there was performance and or master class and then also private lessons. And we felt that no, we should never be funding private lessons for someone to be one-on-one with this person, because one, it's expensive, and like how many people can have private lessons? Only these people who have these specific skills, who are in the con academically. So we didn't do that, but we felt a master class is something that could be open to the public and people could go to and receive some sort of benefit from, although like Ari brings up a good point of like maybe that's not necessarily the case, and master classes are also very, very expensive. So is that necessarily bringing the return of the price? That's another thing we would need to talk about, but those would be the discussions that we would be having regardless of what's in the charter.
You're still on stack if you have anything to talk about, right?
Yeah, and so like with Flute Association, after their first ad hoc, we checked back in about like how heavily attended their master class and their recital and all that stuff went. We talked to one of our committee members, is a conservatory student who I think went to it, was asking about it. I remember him saying it was very heavily attended. Yeah, so we heard that there was a good amount of people there, and they're a pretty organized group and seem to be doing a good job of like publicizing and getting lots of non-conservatory students involved. So yeah, but like we're constantly evaluating how groups are doing as we go on.
Alright, I don't have anyone on stack for the food charter, so is there any other community reports that anyone has? Alright, is there any working group reports that anyone has?
I don't want to take up too much space, so I'm just gonna be brief. Student Health Working Group met this past week. We're also meeting again this week, Thursday at 7 p.m. in Azariah's, because we want to be able to meet up one more time before spring break. And basically, we've kind of refined our goals as a working group and are now making efforts to streamline other initiatives other students have taken that kind of fall in line with the ideas we have. Just briefly, the 5 main ideas that we've all put forth is 1, improving transportation to mental health resources in the community outside of the Oberlin campus. 2, some kind of peer-to-peer mentorships service, whether that's by the phone or in person. 3, more evaluative measures so students are able to self-evaluate the service they receive from student health every time they go. 4, better walk-in hours, which doesn't necessarily mean more, but means that we're gonna, as either somebody or hopefully Senate will reevaluate the walk-in hours that are offered every year. and work with students to, I guess, pick the best options for walk-in hours for each day. And then 5, finally, is communication. I've been talking to some other students about creating a streamlined database that outlines the resources offered at Oberlin in the community and information about student health insurance, and then STI resources, free flu shots, that kind of stuff. So yeah, anyone interested is welcome.
Aaron on staff.
Yeah, so going off that, we had a Sustainable Transportation Working Group meeting on Friday. It went really well. Harrison facilitated, and I took notes, which I feel like I'm doing a lot lately. We're making a lot of progress, a lot of cool meetings coming up. We had about twice as many people this time as we did last time, which was awesome. And yeah, we're making a lot of progress. We might have a Bonner leader working solely on this with us, so progress is being made.
I had a question for Zia. So I remember we were talking about the 24-hour crisis hotline thing that's coming up and how that could be improved. Is that something you're still thinking about through the peer-to-peer approach, or is there something else?
Yeah, if I can direct respond. I know we have the 24-hour nurse hotline, but since that's outsourced, it's in Texas. I think that's only helpful in terms of saying what kind of medicine should I take for this symptom, and that's about it. So yeah, honestly, for students in emotional crisis or mental crisis, that's what I want the peer-to-peer mentorship service to help. And I think for the sake of convenience and confidentiality, I think a phone service would be best. I'm not sure how realistic a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week system is, but I would like to have something that's offered for the majority of the time in a week. And if it comes to actual health emergencies, there shouldn't be a student hotline. They should just call 911. Honestly, so.
Does anyone else have any working group reports?
South Campus Working Group met again. We talked about what the idea of representation meant to each of us. I think one really salient point that we discussed for a while was the idea of equality versus equity. And the conversation, the example that led the conversation was if you have a fence and everybody's trying to watch the baseball game and there are 3 individuals, one who is not able-bodied, one who can see over the fence, and one who can't see over the fence. And there are 3 boxes to sort of give that person, a person or all 3 people, the ability to see the baseball game. If they're equally distributed, aka one of them gets on top of one box, the other one gets on top of the other box, and the third person gets on the third box, you'll get a condition in which the person who can already see now can see higher, the second person who couldn't see can now see, and the person who is maybe not able-bodied or was not able to see cannot see at all still. The idea of equity would be implementing a box distribution system in which the person, both of the people who couldn't see, one of the boxes goes to the one so that that person can see, and then the second 2 boxes go to the person who might not be able-bodied or couldn't see without 2 boxes. And that is talking about distribution of resources. So we kind of applied that to this idea of all of the senators here have 1 vote, right? But in order for Kiki and I to pass something that represent that will actually do something for a community, we might need 10 votes, because historically, our communities have not been represented at this table. So we're sort of moving through this idea of a lot of the discourse at this table is always well, we have to represent everybody fairly and equally, and we're trying to shift the discourse into what equitable action looks like. And so that was a very important conversation, I thought, and again, I'd like to encourage anybody here who's struggling with the idea of between equality and equity to join us so that we can work through some of these problematic ideas of equal representation, because that is not how I think this table operates. So that's all.
Yeah, here's a rendering of that. For the visual learners out there. Equality, like, oh, let's be fair, let's give everybody one box, but clearly there's still people who can't or can barely see over the fence. And equity, in this instance, one person does not receive a box, can still see over the fence just fine. The second person receives one box, they can now begin to see over the fence. And the third person who is like not even close to seeing over the fence receives 2 boxes. Now everyone can see over the fence, see the baseball game, and have a happy night. And 2 concepts we constantly engage with is regards like fairness versus like this is not fair because like I didn't get one, but like also like think about where we stand in our positionality in certain situations, and let's acknowledge privileges we have in certain instances. Sorry to jump start.
Oh, John, can I
just had a clarifying question. I was just, I'm strong that way, but I was just wondering, like, have you guys, like, planned out how exactly, like, votes will be allocated in this situation? Like, is it by student body representation or representation of Senate?
I don't think that we were ever trying to suggest that we should change any of the democratic one person, one vote structures, but also that this model should encourage people who do have votes at the table to consider whose interests they're representing. Because again, do we really need, I'm saying, South Campus community needs more than just me and Kiki considering their interests because of the historical disadvantage that they're always positioned in. That is what I'm asking of people who do have votes on the table. Put them towards the third person. Put them towards the second person. Don't always think that you have to be considering your best interests at the table. One example I give is I am a student here who has health insurance through my father. If I was to ever come across a vote, should we subsidize the cost for students on campus who don't have health insurance so that they have to pay less premiums on their student health, whatever, I would of course vote yes. That's not in my direct interest because why would I want to pay for something that I already have, right? But no, let me step back and think, how can I think about equitable distribution of resources? It's not in my best interest, but this is just something, I use the health insurance thing as an example at a time, and that's how I navigate my own privileges. And so I speak for myself, but there are so many circumstances in which folks are not considering giving up privileges, voting against their interests in the interest of dismantling class privilege and white supremacy on this campus. So I don't know if that example again gives some more tangible ideas about how we can be equitable participants in the Senate, but yeah.
Any other working group reports? All right, let's move on to decisions. Bylaw point of respect. I know Jesse was the one who sent the email, but
I worked with Jesse on this.
you worked with Jesse on that, so
Okay. So the senators all received this, I believe. I don't know, not in your email.
Yes.
But these are rules for having respectful conversation as a group. It's a very long document, so I guess I'll just start going through it and we'll take direct questions or comments as they happen. So to start, the Senate is a place of open conversations and respect, reflecting that goal, and in order to make all senatorial activities a safe space for everyone involved, points of respect shall be used. A senator or community member, defined as any non-senator, may at any time raise their hand. We discussed a hand signal for this, which is the I love you sign in sign language, a little cheesy, but that's what the hand sign would be. So may raise their hand at any time and say point of respect if they wish to identify a disrespectful comment made by a senator or community member. This shall be followed by 2 minutes of 2 minutes of explanation by the individual raising a point of respect, and if applicable, responses by the person or persons implicated. After these 2 minutes, the Senate shall vote by simple majority on whether to bring this discussion to the floor or whether to have the operations manager follow up with the concerned parties after the meeting. And there's a special thing later on that. If Senate votes to bring the discussion to the floor, a 15-minute moderated discussion shall commence. If the vote does not pass and one or both parties feel there is more to be said, they may contact the operations manager after the incident. The operations manager is then responsible for reading their statements at the next meeting of Senate, and the Senate will once again vote as to whether or not bring the discussion to the floor. So that's the basic idea.
Yeah, what happens during this 15-minute moderated discussion?
So the 2 minutes is to discuss why the offended party felt that the comment was disrespectful.
Right.
And then the 15 minutes, if there's some unpacking of that, some conversation that would really benefit the community, to be done. Like, I personally am very offended when people use the word retarded in a derogatory way. And I know that there are people here who don't necessarily have the background that I do and understand why that's offensive, and it might take more than 2 minutes. And if all of Senate felt that that would be a useful discussion to have, then you would have that discussion. If it was like, I don't know, all of Senate felt that this was a problem with a single person and, we could explain it after Senate and it would be fine, then that's also something, because Senate's time is valuable. So I understand that. It's just a way of, So, Clause A. The 15-minute discussion may be extended by a majority vote of the Senate. B. The 2-minute period of explanation should be used to clarify the concerns of the involved parties. C. A senator or community member may submit a point of respect anonymously in writing or by contacting the operation manager outside of the meeting. If this person wishes to remain anonymous, the operations manager shall represent their point of respect at the next meeting. D. A follow-up meeting will be mandatory if in one meeting, one party calls or submits a point of respect twice on another party, or each party calls or submits one point of respect on the other. If out of 4 total points of respect called or submitted between the two parties, if out of 4 meetings, the total points of respect called or submitted between 2 parties equals or is greater than 3, then a follow-up meeting is mandatory. Direct question?
I was just going to ask, isn't this going to be very, very time consuming for Senate overall?
The point of this is that if there's something that's incredibly disrespectful going on, you have 2 minutes to be able to have that discussed without it really impeding the function of Senate. And if it represents a larger problem on Senate, then Senate can choose to spend 15 minutes on that. But from what I've listened to, a lot of problems seem to be escalating lack of communication. And so this allows 2 minutes for you guys to really communicate with each other and get back to doing actual senatorial business. So yeah, there's a typo in here. Sorry about that. If out of 4 meetings, that's Clause D for those of you following along. E, the purpose of the operations manager follow-up is to ensure that each party attempts to understand the opposing viewpoint and can continue to work together amicably and efficiently. Minutes shall be taken on this conversation and be publicly available. F, if a point of respect concerns the operations manager, the Senate shall choose by vote, or I guess you guys usually use the liaison, another senator to preside over the discussion and follow-up meeting. If either party feels that the conversation may be better facilitated by OCDC, a request may be made for OCDC to host the follow-up discussion rather than the operations manager. H, follow-up meetings must take place after a 24-hour cooling down period from the latest incident, and with a week of the latest incident. If the parties cannot find a time to meet because they choose to have OCDC facilitate the conversation, they must submit proof to the operations manager or liaison should the operations manager be involved before the initial week is up that they are working in earnest to schedule the follow-up meeting as quickly as possible.
Sarah,
Yeah.
I have a question.
Yep.
For G, does that mean that if one person requests it, it has to happen? or do both parties have to consent?
I mean, by OCDC's own rules, both parties have to consent. I would expect as senators, if one of you felt that a meeting would be more professionally run by OCDC, that you would consent. But you guys can discuss that amongst yourselves, I guess. I can't speak. I think that if one senator feels OCDC is better, you ought to have to consent, but again, we can't force consent. Question?
Sorry, Paul, are you?
I am, but if she's on stack and she's allowing people to take questions during her time, then
Okay.
I'll allow it.
Yeah, with in E, minutes being taken during the follow-up. First of all, I can imagine that some people, I don't know if it's a contentious issue, some people might want to be able to speak freely and privately. Additionally, that's putting a burden on our committee coordinator, who might not necessarily have the time to do that. And is it being paid to do that?
I guess the point of E was, or the expectation would be that the operations manager would do that. I didn't know that specifically committee. But these rules are adapted from Amherst College, and they actually allow those meetings to be attended by the public, which I thought was a poor choice for our personal college, because I think that these things could lead to, like, not necessarily ganging up, but just like a lot of pressure to understand immediately at these meetings. And I think that's not what these meetings are about. They're about open communication, which is why I wanted minutes, because they should be, like, people should know what's going on in these meetings, in my opinion. So when we were writing this, that's how we adapted that. But yeah.
I'd really like to hear other senators' opinions on that, but we can table that before you're done.
Yeah.
Or until after.
And that's like totally something I realized. Yeah.
Is it possible that like we could do a by vote system for each specific meeting on whether minutes should be taken? Could that possibly?
I don't think that Sarah can make those. I think we have to decide and have to come to like a vote on the proposal with amendments or not. So I think, like Lauren said, it's a conversation to have after we go through it.
I'll let Sarah finish.
I think
Yeah, I had a question. I forgot it. So like, I want to know what I'm sorry, like maybe it's because you haven't finished, but what exactly is your point? Like, what exactly, what end goal do you have in mind, and do the benefits of this, whatever they are, of like, you know, to know what they are in your opinion, outweigh the costs to reach whatever goal it is that you have in mind?
So I guess one of the big things that I saw at Senate, and I've heard from plenaries, and I've heard from various senators, is it feels like sometimes at this table different languages are being spoken. Yes, we're all speaking English, but that doesn't mean we all speak the same form of English. And meaning that words mean different things to me than they do you. Tone means different things. The way we express ourselves is different because we all have unique backgrounds. And so after I thought about that, I thought, well, why don't we just have like very explicit language rules for Senate? But that would only reflect those who wrote the language rules, and that's not fair. So then we did some research into what other schools do and what other schools have in their bylaws to allow people to speak the same language without forcing specific language to be used or not used.
I'm sorry, I don't think you understand my question. I mean, I get what you're saying, and I think you explained to me why you wrote it, not so much what was the point of it. What's like?
Can you explain the difference between those?
Because you're giving me background history about how you came to making this resolution, and I just want to know the exact point of the resolution.
The point of the resolution is to hold every senator responsible for communicating openly and respecting each other's opinions.
Okay, there we go. That's what I wanted to know.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
And I just wanted to know, like, it seems like there are a lot of costs in terms of like time. Like we as Oberlin students would have to like sort of give up or like senators, not we, would have to give up. Would have to like, give up in order to attend
So,
these things. Like, so there seems to be a lot of cost, and I'm just like, in your opinion, how do the benefits of your point, like what you just said, outweigh the cost?
so
You kind of want to see that.
yeah, I got it. So it's 2 minutes of your meeting here, and their meeting. Sorry, I don't know exactly what your position is.
I'm making fun of you.
So that's 2 minutes. So even if there were 10 in a meeting, which would seem excessive to me, but that's 20 minutes of time. Even if it costs 3 minutes to do the vote on as to whether or not to extend the discussion, that's half an hour of time for senators to be able to more calmly discuss things at hand. And the reason that, sorry, let me find
No,
that.
that's good. I'm good on that.
Okay.
Yeah, interesting. I was just curious.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I was on I. Yeah, we got a lot of letters here. So, if a senator is repeatedly the recipient of a point of respect for the same specific reason that then a senator may receive 1 point. A specific reason may include repeated dismissive or derogatory language towards a group or person, or repeated dismissing or belittling of a group or person's opinion, or repeatedly using directly offensive or insulting statements about a group or person. Repeatedly making false accusations against a senator or a community member, or interrupting, defined as direct interruption or side conversations while another individual is speaking. J. A senator's or community members' body language, tone, race, ethnicity, nationality, sex and gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, or political orientation, defined as an affiliation or an affinity towards a political party or doctrine on or off of this campus, is not cause for a point of respect. Additionally, a senator's voting record is not cause for a point of respect. Every person has a right to enter into discourse. It is only when their words directly disrespect a person or group of persons that a point of respect may be called or submitted. Okay.
I have a question, sir.
Yeah.
Under I, does repeatedly just mean more than one?
Yes.
Or it just sounds, okay.
Sorry, we can change that.
So does that mean for each of offense afterwards you would get another point if it's the same offense?
Right, and the language of this is for the same specific reason. So I was talking before about the use of the word retarded in a derogatory sense. If I told you that offends me, gave you a list of reasons why, we had our 2-minute discussion, Senate decided to end that there, and then 5 minutes later you use the word retarded, that's a repeated offense, and you would earn 1 point for that. Just to, yeah.
Is it the same word, or is it just something that is offensive in a similar way? Because what if multiple things are offensive to a similar group?
So, I guess the first clause of that, the first part before the semicolon, repeated or dismissive derogatory language towards a group or person, or repeated, dismissing, or belittling of a group or person's opinion, or repeatedly using directly offensive language or insulting statements about a group or person. So, if they were targeted at a specific person but didn't use the exact same words, that could be repeated. If you just use a word generally in a derogatory way, then it has to be the same word, if that makes sense.
Question. Just as regards language. So how is it so I know there's been senators who said calling me sexist is offensive and disrespectful. In that instance I disagree. But yeah, you're saying if I were to proceed to do that again, I would be pointing to calling out senators for being this, that, and the other.
So in that instance you are referring to a person instead of their actions. If you refer to just their actions,
or their actions,
So if you said they, I don't know, let's see. I want to think of a good example for you, so just give me a second.
Someone is being classist.
Okay, so
that's a classist comment.
That's a
sexist comment.
You can say that's a sexist comment, but you can't say that person is inherently sexist because of their comment. You can hold your own beliefs, and that's fine, but if they're going to offend another senator and escalate. I mean, Kiki, this is what you asked about, and I'm addressing your concern. If they're going to escalate the tension in this room, then they're not for public ears, is what's happening right here.
I just don't keep sad.
Yeah.
Guys,
I mean, if you want to like call on people, do I guess I'm gonna keep stack because Ari asked me to keep stack. I'm gonna let you finish, and then I have a list of stacks I'm gonna go to.
okay, I just didn't know, like, clarifying questions.
Yeah.
Can I take it first?
If there's a C, I'm gonna wait for you to finish, and then
Okay.
if people have a clarifying question, I'm gonna have a clarifying question. We'll jump stack, and I'm gonna address it.
So K. Points of respect may be submitted to the operations manager in reference to any senatorial obligations, including meetings outside of plenary, working groups, office hours, and open forums. These will merit a 2-minute discussion at the next plenary and a follow-up discussion, if warranted, between the senator, involved parties, and operations manager or liaison. These may not be cause for the assignment of points. Failure to attend a follow-up meeting without permission from the operations manager or liaison in charge of the meeting results in the addition of 5 points to the senator's total. The senator must still attend that follow-up meeting. Each week the senator fails to attend the follow-up meeting, 5 points will be added to their total. A total of 15 points from failure to attend follow-up meetings will result in removal. Points may be appealed by the regular process.
I have a clarifying question.
Can we let her finish, and then we can go to clarifying questions?
Oh, okay.
All follow-up meetings will be unpaid and last a minimum of 15 minutes and a maximum of 30 minutes, unless all parties involved agree to extend the meeting. A senator may not be required to attend for multiple follow-up meetings for the same transgression during the same meeting. This does not mean that if the senator is repeating an action, doing it more than once, there's the definition of repeating, and has already heard a discussion, the 2-minute discussion raised on every point of respect, that they cannot be pointed for it repeatedly. Raising a point of respect is not the basis for raising another point of respect. P. Operations manager and liaison must obtain training in conflict resolution / mediation. All right.
I have I don't know if there's an order of what jump stack more between clarifying questions and point of order. I do have a point of order, and then I see a number. So I'm going to go with the point of order first, and then I'm going to address the clarifying question in order that I saw the hand raised.
I think in the future, since that we all received this document, it's not really typical of us to like read the entire thing out loud. Just saying that like takes up a lot of space, and all of us have received this document. Zia sent us some stuff. We looked over it. We all got this beforehand, but I just wanted to say that I don't know how helpful that is for me.
Okay, I'm going to go clarifying question. I saw your hand first.
So maybe I missed this, but what's the deal with the point system?
Senators can probably answer this better than me, but as far as I know, senators receive points for not doing their job.
Okay.
And if you receive 30 points, then you are removed from the Senate.
Okay.
Does that answer your question? We can pull up the bylaws. There's a list of.
Not really. How often before this proposal, how often are senators assigned points?
Senators.
Every week. There's no board
I got a
online.
point.
I'm going to directly respond to that because
Okay, I understand now.
on our bylaws, which is on the Senate website, if you Google Oberlin Student Senate, it's the first link. You can read the whole number of points assigned and what the cause of why they're assigned points. I would recommend that you do that. And do you want me to read them? I can.
No.
Okay, you're fine.
Yep.
Are there any more clarifying questions?
Yeah, on point K, since points of respect can be presented by both Senate and community members. I think it's a little, I'm trying to find the right word, abusive of this specific point to just punish the senator for missing a follow-up meeting when, if the community member was to address the point of respect, and then a follow-up meeting was occurred, as well as not paying the senator for said follow-up meeting if it's relating to the community.
I can address all those points. So the payment clause is very specific. We put it in there because of past abuse of Senate payment, and also, if you guys didn't notice, senators also have friends. I know that we like to think that they don't. They do have lives outside of this room, and the idea that this is a very personal and very somewhat arbitrary thing, so to have them be able to pick fights with their friends and then have these meetings and get paid for an extra 3 hours a week seems unreasonable. Every job has obligations outside of the job that you generally don't get paid for, and if this is a job, then our senators should be able to respect that. And they already do things outside of their job that they're not paid for, like learn the bylaws and the Constitution and the student handbook.
And then a point system thing, it still seems a little abusive to senators. If they miss a follow-up meeting and they're getting 5 points, but if a community member was to miss that follow-up meeting with the senator, nothing is done for that. Like, I feel like the point, like if you do get a point, it should be like less into like 1 point than 5 points, which after like a certain number of missed follow-up meetings for legitimate reasons could get dismissed.
So that's why we have the operation manager is in charge of giving out points, and they're also in charge of these meetings. So if there's clear abuse by the community member, the operations manager doesn't have to give points at their discretion. Also, all points, it's, I don't know if it's Part K, it's not Part K, but somewhere in here, Part L, points may be appealed by the regular process. There's a process for appealing points. You can bring that to Senate as a senator, and they'll be redacted.
Can you just do a sub-clause that if a community member was to miss a follow-up meeting without excuse or logical reason by the operation managers, at that point, that follow-up meeting is just null and void, and the senator can like go on without their answers?
I mean, you bring up a good point of, in general, if a meeting is scheduled and then someone doesn't show up, that's not addressed in here, so we can address that in here if you want.
This is turning into more of a conversation, which is more meant for stack. This is more specific questions. It's less about opinions. So I can put you on stack if you want me to.
Oh no,
Okay. Does anyone else have specific questions that they want to ask, clarifying questions, or should I move on to stack? I have Kiki. I have a long list of stack. I'm just going to read it off. I have Kiki, Aaron, Lauren, Ari, Anders, Rashini. Does anyone else want to be added at this point? Okay, just raise your hand and signal me if you want to be added, but I'm going to add you.
Okay, I have a few points. First, it says in the beginning, it says, "Send the place of open conversation and respect." I'm not sure where you got that from. Reflecting that goal, and in order to make senatorial activities a safe space, also like a conflation of what the phrase safe space means. By no means a safe space. There's no intentional behaviors by senators to maintain the safe space if it was that, and so that is a point of contention. Like, I don't know. I would like to hear senators' points of views on that as regards like the language. I don't like that language specifically because this is not at all a safe space for everyone involved, including everyone in this, every single senator, and even those who are invited into this space. Another thing is, you talk about like this shall. You said this shall be followed by 2 minutes, you have to have 2-minute conversations, and The Senate shall vote by a simple majority on whether to bring this discussion to the floor or whether to have operations. I think this also speaks more to like the idea of like equity versus equality, like as regards like whose faces are at this table and like who's the majority at this table. Like what we see is disrespectful, what we see is respectful. There's going to be a disparity in balance of opinions. I mean, obviously that's always the case, and we always have to fight to get to get our vote. Sorry about that. But I think especially as regards, this is like a specifically like opinionated thing as regards like what is respect and what is not. So that's a point of concern. Another point of concern is if either party feels that the conversation may be better facilitated by OCDC, a request may be made. And I know you said that, like senator, you expect senators to consent to that. I think that's coercion. Like as a senator, I don't have to necessarily feel comfortable with OCDC. Also, there are MRC CCs who are trained to facilitate conversations, and I think that should be an option if there is like that. Also, I don't think senators should be required to meet with OCDC if they so choose not to be, and that shouldn't be an expectation of senators because there's different feelings about like OCDC. I particularly like, I don't know. The next thing is that in here is if you meet outside, you have to like show that you're making an effort. If you're meeting with like OCDC and blah blah blah, like why is the burden on the person who is disrespected to make that effort and to expend time and energy to facilitate that conversation? If they felt like they were disrespected, I think the burden should be at that on anything. I don't know. It should be more balanced. We should think about who we're putting more time constraints on and who we are doing more of. Second, I think you addressed this. You talked about the senator repeatedly, and you said that like more than once. I think that's very harsh. It's like a no tolerance policy for disrespect. And I think again with the different opinions of senators as regards like what respect is and what not is, what respect is not, or what disrespect is. And then having like signing points to senators. Yeah, again, we only received I think 20 points before we're censured, or 25 points before we're censured, and then 30 points before we're removed. I think these are like critical things you can think about when we're saying, oh, just assign a point if someone says like, oh, that's disrespectful. Like I said, I've been called disrespectful for saying someone is sexist. I don't think that's disrespectful. I think that's real. And that should be addressed. It's something we should have open conversations about. And it's not, again, I don't think that, for me personally, I don't think that saying someone is sexist or saying someone is classist is a personal attack rather than like an opportunity for them to reevaluate their lives. And where they're coming from in their position and certain things. And again, like the question of like who defines respect. I'm sorry. So again, yeah, like there's definitely a disparity in power. I think as regards to meeting outside, you touched on this one with Vernon, but the additional 5 points and not being paid, I think those two in conjunction does not take into consideration like students who have other jobs and saying students who have classes who have to do other things outside of Senate and not being compensated for that in any way and or being penalized for not being in those spaces. That I don't think is fair or reflective of the time commitments that senators have and the reasons we set up point systems and abilities to be paid. And I think that kind of like looks over that specifically. And then I don't know if this is something that I think this automatic removal if you acquire 30 points on Senate to say that if you after 15 points you are removed, especially with such arbitrary standards. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's even. I think you should consider how the point system works as regards to this language. That I don't think fits within what I don't know, value-wise, like what we weigh in as like important. And I think again, there's a disparity of like power dynamics on Senate and like what people have called out as being disrespectful or respectful, assigning 15 points and not being paid for these meetings outside of Senate. It would be. I don't know, I think an injustice to like most senators, not all senators. I think I was also concerned about having either the operations manager or the liaison, like you said, must attain training. What sense, like what trainings are you talking about? I think that senators in general should be attending trans-allyship, anti-racist trainings multiple times a semester because as regards to the space that I'm in right now, like I can see like as regards like the review article that came out in the opinion section, we clearly need trainings in Senate. Like, there's clearly, like, all of us need trainings. And so I would feel especially uncomfortable having the operations manager or liaison, considering who the liaison is, facilitating a conversation about conflict when, in fact, I've seen little effort from in the past, not necessarily with the people who are liaison operations manager currently, little kind of like commitment to being, I guess, unbiased or kind of like resolving conflict or mediating conversations in ways that acknowledge, you know, race structures, class structures, gender structures, and all of these things. So that is like something that I definitely would need, if I were to even consider passing this at all, like it needs to be addressed. And yeah, that's to the end of that.
Alright, I'm Aaron, I'm second.
So my points were already expressed. I think the 15-point removal is absolutely, it just shouldn't be a thing. Like, we have 30 points on our group. Like, the point system's like a real thing. Dropping that down to 15 is just arbitrarily, it's a little ridiculous. I'm just pretty uncomfortable with most of this. I feel like this could be horribly abused. Just a lot of the time. I don't know, like, it's centered around the question of, like, what's a disrespectful comment? Like, is it a microaggression? Is it something that's, like, not proper for our table? Is it, like, I don't know, like, I think we've addressed, like, intent versus impact. Like, I'd like to hold us more to that, because I feel like all around the table we don't always, like, recognize everything that we say, but, like, I think that, I don't know, I think that I want to give our group a little more trust for the future. I think we can all do better. But like having this like really structured, rigid like policing system doesn't necessarily render the answer to that.
Yeah, I don't want to repeat too much of what's already been said, but I think that this sort of is based on an assumption that there's some objective idea of respect, and I think that what we've seen this semester and last semester is that we all have very different ideas about what is and isn't respectful behavior and respectful comments, and yeah, I just want to echo what Kiki said, that this just seems too arbitrary and too easy to be abused.
Ari?
What's concerning overall about this is that it seems to kind of rest on the assumption that conversations about microaggressions and discomfort within the space are counterproductive to the conversation. I think, honestly, if you go back into all of the recordings, every time Kiki and I talk about our positionality, every time Kiki and I talk about the position of South Campus, we were talking about it in reference to like an institutional situation, in reference to appointments to the honor committee, in reference to the way that we approach committees. There's always something in which we're referencing to larger systems of institutional racism and oppression. The fact that I'm not trying to assume where this kind of bylaw is coming from, but I think it is what I'm sort of getting feelings about is that it's coming from this idea that like all we do here, and like Senator Mahmoud last semester did say, like, I'm not here to talk about this little shit. I specifically remember that comment will stay with me for the rest of my life. Yeah, we should look at the notes. I just remember a storm out and like something like, oh, along the lines of, I didn't come here to talk about these things. And this is like a really, really like repeating theme, which is like, we're not here on Senate to talk about privilege and oppression, about your positionality as a low-income or brown person or queer person. We're not here to talk about that. And like that is such a misdirected way of looking at this, and this is the Senate's constant problem, which is like every time we bring in our positionalities, every time we bring in issues around privilege oppression, it's always in reference to structural oppression, as well as, because honestly, like, and as well as like the interdialogue, but like I don't ever hear anybody at this table talking about race as it relates to like larger institutions, even if it's to talk about whiteness as it relates to, you know, committees and faculty, the faculty appointments and meetings and stuff. Like nobody is ever talking about class, race, gender, ability as it relates to systems, and we're always like positioning these conversations on like a between me and this senator there is this amount of privilege, like as a low-income person versus another person on the at the table who is a middle-class person or a white person or a non-white person. Like we're always talking about these conversations in reference to this like small space, which is why we are always so, and I don't know if this is because folks aren't listening to me or to Kiki, but what we're trying to do is talk about these things as it references like larger Oberlin and larger like society. And so like I feel like this document is really coming from a space that's like, let's just like reduce all of these notions of disrespect to like the dialogue at the table rather than the institution that we're always here discussing, or that I'm always here discussing. Like let's talk about institutional racism, let's talk about institutional like transphobia, stuff like that. So like again, I just think this piece of document is just misguided all around, and like centered around this idea that these are like, again, just a quote. I mean, maybe I just won't quote, to paraphrase like this stupid little shit that Kiki and I always bring up, which is like how people regard what we bring to this table. Like, no, we're not talking about the interpersonal as much as we're talking about the institution. So I just think that this is just like kind of not really helpful at all.
Yeah, I propose that we pass, just because of the language we have to say, pass. But senators, I propose that we pass this bill, so those in, like after we finish that, so just to clarify, those in favor would say aye, those not in favor, yes. Was that? Okay, so, yeah, and I had a process suggestion to close stack after everyone who wants to on stack, down stack, and those who are on stack, finish stack. So, anyway else, yeah, so that's a process suggestion.
So general feelings about these process suggestions, yeah, everyone who wants to be on this team. So right now I have on stack Anders, Sarah, did you mean Leela? Leela, and Peter. So I'm going to start with Anders.
Yeah, I think I probably missed a little bit of the beginning as I was studying. But I would be curious to know who like wrote this, like specifically wrote this. Because I guess honestly to me this seems like a reaction to some of the conversations that I've been having, that have been taking place. And I guess reading the review opinion article, I read a lot of quotes, like some really interesting quotes about like revealing what a lot of senators think is offensive. And that was really, really tough to read. I couldn't even finish it. I was like I was just like, wow. So I think maybe instead of taking all the energy that we don't have and putting it into like enforcing different ideas of respect, maybe everyone could go to some of the trainings that people have been talking about, like the ones that just happened on first crafts. Like no one went to those, but we're having all these really interesting conversations. I don't know. Like that would be a much better use of your time. I think this is it a proposal for a new bylaw? Is that what it is?
Yes.
I think it's ridiculous. Sorry. No, I'm not sorry. It's ridiculous.
Sarah?
Alright, I'm just going to go down the list of people who have spoken and try to address your guys' concerns as much as I can. To speak to Anders' question of who wrote this, the primary author was me. It's been vetted by someone at the MRC. I did not ask for their permission, so I don't feel comfortable giving their name. But I spent a couple hours talking to this person at the MRC and the problems that were going on at this campus in general. They gave me their blessing, and so I tried to get as many different institutions involved that I knew of as possible. I didn't contact the CDC. Clarifying question?
Sorry. Did they give you your blessing after you read it, or
Yes.
like after you, like before you read it?
They read it, we had a conversation, they made a couple edits to it, which have remained in here, and said best of luck in getting this through. Like, they said it was good and fine. So that addresses your question, I hope.
One sec, did you have another clarifying question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's okay. I was just wondering if a member. Oh, my name's Lexi. I was wondering if a member of the MIC has ever been present to be here and understand the kind of tensions that arise, or like the atmosphere. Has there ever been an MIC staff here for a meeting?
At least not
to
this
anyone's
semester.
knowledge.
No.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
So you can continue.
So I guess the next biggest thing that people are talking about is different definitions of respect. And so the whole idea of this document is for us to be able to come together and say that yes, we do have different definitions of respect, but wholly and most importantly, I respect each person as an individual and will try my best to see from that individual's point of view why what I said could be upsetting to them, and I will try my best to explain myself and explain my positions in a way that will no longer be upsetting to them, but will instead challenge their ideas, instead of challenge their inherent character, which is what they generally hold dear. So like, we all have different languages and different definitions of respect. Just growing up very differently. So this is a way for us to take 2 minutes out of meeting and be able to define our definition of respect and be able to define why this may upset us and why this may up the tension in the room. There's about, like, we all have different backgrounds, so we're all going to see respect differently, no matter how many trainings we go to, and we can change that, and we should. Everybody in this room should go to trainings. Everybody in this room should go to events organized by the student body to see things from different perspectives. But the reality is that we all have different baggage we carry with us, and therefore we all have different ways of defining this word. This is a way for us to communicate that in a calm manner and in a way that allows the other person to understand how they can help you feel more comfortable, how they can help you see their point of view without putting you on the defensive. And that's a lot of what's been seen in this room, is immediately someone gets upset and the other person doesn't know why, and then that person goes on the defensive instead of having constructive arguments about institutions, constructive arguments about how we can create equity instead of equality. These are all great arguments that won't be taken away by this document. This document is purely so every person can feel comfortable in this room. And yes, that might be a pipe dream, but this is what this document is working for. Kiki addressed the opening statements and how Kiki felt like the opening statements did not accurately represent this room. This document is written hypothetically to stay in the bylaws forever. This document is written so that maybe one day, hopefully, I truly hope one day, this document will reflect in its opening sentences what Senate actually is, because this is what it should be, a place of open conversations and respect. And this is what this document allows for. So, also in my conversation with the representative at the MRC, originally I had the MRC in there as facilitating conversations, the MRC or OCDC. I was told the MRC is not to facilitate those conversations. That's why they're not in there, because they said they were not to do that. So that answers that question. We talk about 15 points being too low. The discussion about 15 points is these follow-up discussions are when if these follow-up discussions only happen as defined in Clause D if two people have a repeated problem with each other. So the reason that these follow-up discussions happen is because two people are very clearly, very repeatedly having trouble communicating with each other. And that's why these follow-up discussions are so important. If you miss these, it's because you're not trying to communicate with this person. And it might be slightly uncomfortable, but these are the most important discussions because it's very much a clash between personalities and a clash between definitions of respect. And this is when we can hash that out between these two specific people. And the operations manager can help you discuss that. That's why the bar is lowered for removal. And maybe that's too low. But the idea is that if you miss 3 of these follow-up meetings, then you're very blatantly not trying to communicate with your fellow senators, and that is hurting Senate as a whole. So that was the 15 points. And once again, they're unpaid because there's been problems with payment in the past of Senate. And it is your guys' job to have a base level of respect for each person on the Senate, and you should be able to work towards that without the incentive of money. You should be able to work towards that with the incentive of just being good people. I know that if I have a personal conflict, I will go find someone and talk with them, but that's just me, and that's just who I am. OCDC. Once again, consent has to be had by both parties, but I think it's a valid option out there if you feel that operations manager or liaison isn't competent to have this discussion. There needs to be a third party, a professionally trained party, a party that does this professionally even more specifically. And that is OCDC on our campus. If you would like to talk about problems with OCDC or another alternative, it is more than welcome. But that is why OCDC was chosen, and that's what they're here for. That is their job. That is why our college pays them. And we talked about, so when we talk about labels and how they've been used or how they can be used, there are a lot of things that a lot of people may not feel comfortable saying at this table about their personal lives. And when we assign people labels about their inherent character, that can destroy who they feel they are. But also by assigning character traits instead of assigning characteristics to an action, we're defining who they are in our own eyes. And they have the right to defend that to to the accuser, and be able to talk to that being offensive to them, be able to say, you know what, I might not have worked hard in this one instance, but to me I'm inherently a hard worker, and it makes me feel bad that you are labeling me in this way towards the student body, because these minutes go online. And so you can then reflect upon your own actions and say, you know what, I attributed something to you that isn't an actual attribute of your personality. It's you failed one time. Maybe you failed repeatedly to me, but it's not an attribute to your personality. And I can respect that, and I will be more specific about actions rather than inherent characteristics next time. So I think I've addressed all the points that have been brought up. So yeah.
Hi guys. I'm not on Senate, so I don't feel free to push back on this. And I know you all have been trying to figure out your own accountability system, and I appreciate the effort, Sarah, in trying to facilitate the process. I also agree with a lot of what's been said as far as like we have subjective definitions of respect, and thank you for addressing those. I'm wondering if you guys decide to use some of this point system, if maybe it could be used as like a collective sort of thing, like you keep track of how many points Senate has accumulated as a group, so it becomes sort of a group responsibility to create a space that's respectful as opposed to like a person-on-person targeted thing, because I think that might encourage people to be defensive. And maybe also if you all have like things that trigger into place, if you reach a certain number of points, that you have an incentive for everyone to be better to each other and have those one-on-one conversations in a way that's like human and respectful. I mean, y'all are smart people. You're hardworking. You're here for a reason. Like, I don't know. And I really wish that more of you had been at the training today, because we did talk a lot about like why creating a space that's safe for everyone is good for everyone, and not just people who fall into like people oppressed peoples. It's everyone benefits. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe making a group thing.
All right, Mark.
I'm curious whether or not there are any other templates which outline like ethics clauses besides this one that you saw.
Nope.
No,
It's the direct response answer.
Because I do feel like there are a lot of, I don't know, there are a lot of layers of subjectivity into the different steps, which I think aren't very conducive to having this like work repeatedly. I also think that it's kind of, I don't know, very much based around the discussions we've been having right now, and just thinking like 5 years down the road, I don't know if this necessarily reflects what the atmosphere is like. But I do think that the idea of holding one another accountable for waste is important. So I'd support like the general notion of doing that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but the last part of what I said is I just support the notion of having some kind of general accountability clause where we can, I don't know like how you would necessarily write that into language, because everybody is different, and so like how do we, like as the group changes every year, how do we keep up with that? But I think it's a good idea, and maybe like outside of this session, some people can get together and talk about like alternative models.
Peter?
You can strike me. In a second.
Yes. I think that this also document kind of infers that the assumption that like tension or discomfort is bad always. I think as regards growing, that is a necessary process. As regards safety again, I think safety is oftentimes conflated with discomfort. The feelings of being unsafe is conflated with like being uncomfortable. As regards like the review, like it was mentioned that like a lot of violent language was being used, and I think it was referring to the idea of someone being called out about being like racist or classist or this, that, and the other. The idea that like, oh, that's unsafe to be called out on these things because you feel uncomfortable about being called out on these things. And personally, like, there's, I don't know, I think there's room for discomfort if it is in the process of growing, rather than, there just needs to be a conscious effort and thought about whether you feel uncomfortable or whether you feel unsafe, and obviously I respect what people feel and they decide what they feel, but also there should be like a push from senators, especially to push the boundaries of what they feel like comfortable, like, you know, and as regards like being called out and like these things. And also like, I don't think that it's fair to say that the oppressed can't call out the oppressors. To say that, I can't call you sexist, I can't call you racist, as like someone who, I don't know, I feel like just because of the sake of your comfort, my comfort was clearly disregarded when you made those comments that were sexist or that was racist or that was classist. So as regards comfort level, like I think you should take into account the ones who are being offended, rather more so than the ones who are feeling uncomfortable for offending people. And the logic doesn't make any sense to me. Also, as regards safety, and you said you spoke about oh, like senators should like want to go out of like this and have conversations with senators. There's been senators that have been mad violent in their language, in regards to me. There's no way in hell I would go outside of Senate space and have conversations with them unpaid for the sake of teaching them things about me. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I think that was a lack of consideration as regards those who are constantly being like, whatever. I don't want to say anything that's going to fit anybody. Yeah, so like think about that as regards like saying senators are required to go unpaid and on the record, and if they don't attend, they're appointed outside of this space to have conversations with those people who they feel have disrespected them. Yeah, and teach them why they felt disrespected, or have a conversation about that. That to me doesn't make any sense. I think the idea that was brought up about like a group accountability, I think that if that was implemented, like so then like after attaining so many points, perhaps like if Senate attained so many points as regards like disrespect or like whatever points of respect has been brought up, then there should be a required training for like, you know, after X amount of points, if that is something we decide to implement. But as regards my proposal, I think that because of all the points of contention or concern, at least from my perspective, I would rather scratch this proposal and a new draft be brought to Senate to vote on. But yeah, and so, yeah, it's just where I'm coming from.
Yummy.
I agree with a couple of the statements that have been said so far, particularly Andrew's, Ari, Kiki, and part of what Layla said. I do applaud the attempt at being able to facilitate something that would work for everyone. I think that is an important to take into consideration. I do think that there are a couple of holes, though, that make it easy for discomfort to be overlooked and sort of like passed off as like, oh, I feel disrespected, and then like people are like, oh, I'm so sorry, and then it like goes away, and that's not really like how things work. Respect to me, respect is just kind of like an opinion, so like how you feel, and so when I think about racism, sexism, classism, ableism, et cetera, those aren't things that like are, in my opinion, those things aren't debated. It's not like racism is real, sexism is real. Those things aren't like played around with according to like how you feel about them. And also part of the learning process in these things and acknowledging people's positionality comes with the ability to say, or the ability to recognize that one is not being necessarily personally attacked despite the fact that they said it. And it's an acknowledgement of larger institutional issues, which has already been said several times by Ari, Kiki, and a couple other people. So I think until Senate is able to recognize those things as not personal and sort of acknowledge the institutional things going on, that like that the document is not going to work. I just like, I don't know, like Leila said, the workshop today would have been really helpful for a couple of people, and just like in recognizing that things aren't always like, it's not going after Sarah, you know, it's going after some of the things that occur because of our positionality.
Yeah, so I'm still not in favor of this from what's been said, but I guess to draw on that workshop today, Chris Kratz said something that kind of stuck with me, which was along the lines of, and I could be doing harm to this statement, but like the intentions or the mistakes of like well-intentioned white people, while harmful and like can certainly have impact, pale in comparison to the premature death, mass incarceration, etc., caused by structural systems of oppression. So like I'm. Of white people, they pale in comparison to the problem of structural oppression. Yeah, mass incarceration. So I'm a cis white man. I'm gonna make mistakes in this conversation, or in this plenary. I have made mistakes before. Ari's called me out on it before in the joint charting subcommittee last semester, and it hurt a lot when I like got that email. but I thought about it, and I'm still thinking about it. So like, on the sense of people feeling uncomfortable talking, like I'm talking right now, and like I'm still trying to like navigate like active listening versus like I don't want to be just hearing and like stepping back and not engaged. So I guess like I think it's possible that we can do this without this, and I really appreciate you, Sarah, for like bringing this to us and like letting us have this conversation. And I don't want to like invalidate the work that it took to bring this here and like what it took to like talk in front of all of us, because like again, people aren't always comfortable also because like this thing is recorded. People are here, like people are around the table, like this is getting out there in Oberlin. But I don't know, like we have a lot of potential in this group, or in this body, and I'm getting sick of hearing Senate as like just that like shitty organization that can't do anything, because like we can, like we just need to talk to each other a little bit more. Like I'm a little frustrated with all this. Like I don't know. I just think it's possible to get past all this. That's my
Yeah, so far I've heard a lot from Sarah about why we should do this, but if there are any senators who are in favor of this, I'd really like to hear them advocate for it, because man, this is affecting us. And if not, I would like to go to a peace proposal.
Suggestion. Since the project suggestion to close stack was not passed, and considering, perhaps the next few comments, senators can jump stack as a rights process suggestion. Senators jump stack in the conversation, and then take those after who are not senators. Also realize, because for Lauren's reason, any senators advocating for this, because we do have to vote on it, and we do also, we are the ones mainly affected by this, so that's why we hear senators. General feelings. Okay, it does not pass.
Alright, I have myself. Something that's concerning to me is the issue of the unpaid time. I mean, a lot of senators are pretty busy people. We're involved in other organizations on campus, which is some of the reasons why some of us run for Senate, is to address these issues. And believe it or not, some of us come from low-income backgrounds and like need the money to pay their bills. They value their work on Senate as a job. They're going to graduate from this place with a lot more debt than they want to graduate from. And asking people to do their job but not get paid to do their job, I think is asking a lot from senators in the room. I'm done. Lexi, you're on stack.
I noticed in the document that we're talking about that there was kind of mention of like an optimism for an eventual safe space. Is that correct? This being, and I feel like if that's something that these like rules are set out to do, that they should be compiled by the people who feel unsafe in this space, and that it should be more collaborative. That's my own opinion. I also heard something about calling someone's actions sexist or racist instead of the person themselves. And I honestly think, I don't understand why sexism or racism or transphobia or what have you can't be a mark on someone's character. When we go to this privileged institution, we have the information here to educate ourselves, to not be problematic. And that's just my opinion.
Zia, you're next.
I really agree with what Lexi had to say. I would also like to say that as this proposal stands, I think it has critical flaws. but I think the motivation behind it should be taken into consideration, which I believe, in my understanding, is attempting to approach the structural flaws that align the way that we engage in discourse here. And I think there are times where we as senators fail to respect the unique perspectives of other senators and members of our communities, and I think that especially is apparent when it comes to engaging in discourse with voices that represent marginalized communities. And I think attending MRC, anti-racist, and feminist workshops are a really good starting point, but I also think as a Senate we should consider taking a more aggressive approach towards resolving the tension that results from our failure to fully respect and recognize the unique perspectives that each senator brings to the table. I don't think it should rely on utilizing the point system. I think like this kind of discourse should come from like a real place within us, and I think we all have that real place within us. And yeah, those are just my thoughts.
Madeline?
Yeah. Actually, I agree with what Zia just said, and I just want to say that this proposal does nothing to address the actual problem of disrespect. It just catches the problem in a net of procedure in which hurt feelings and power dynamics will not be addressed. And if they are, they will only be addressed in a punitive framework. And unless someone besides Sarah wants to step up and support it, I highly recommend moving into a vote.
Peter, you're next.
Awesome. Yeah, so I'll admit coming to the table, reading this over, I was more a little bit confused. It's long, it's complicated, and it also has a requirement to do more meetings, which as somebody with 4 jobs, I am definitely more a little bit afraid of happening in my life. But I think it's a really important push in the right direction. And I think the fact that we're trying to create a space to actually talk about the issues that we're talking about anyway, and we're trying to make that something where we can all actually get along and actually see eye to eye and see that person to person. And if we can do that on an individual basis so we actually start to understand each other, and I mean obviously augmenting that with going to workshops and talking about trainings and doing trainings and stuff like that, I think that's going to go a very, very long way to actually improving our communication, helping us all work together, because we all have to work together. There's a room of 15 senators and an entire community that all have to get along to try to do the best thing for the student body. And pushing in the direction of trying to actually get along, trying to see eye to eye so that we can actually make things better for the student body is why we're here and why we get paid. And frankly, I think if we can't make things better, then it's our responsibility to fix that so we can make things better for the student body. And if we're doing this job, then we should make ourselves able to do the actual important part of the job, which is actually changing how the school runs and actually changing how things are. And I think that definitely we need to see eye to eye and understand each other to be able to do that. And I think this is the best push so far for that. And if we can actually get past having arguments, we could get through our agenda. And I think if we create a space to do that explicitly, clearly, and make it so everyone can actually talk to everyone else and get the respect they feel as if they deserve, then that's how we're going to fix this. Because if Student Senate continues into the future and there are disagreements and there are people feeling disrespected down the line, it's going to continue to be a problem. And this is an actual long-term solution. And so it's not just the situation we have right now, this is long-term. How we can make sure that we all get along, we all see eye to eye, everyone feels respected, and hell, people feel uncomfortable, it's going to happen because that's how it is. We're in a political scenario, people are going to argue, but people should feel safe. And I feel like talking to each other and actually getting to know each other and understanding each other is how people are going to feel safe, and in the long term how they're going to get along. And that's on a small scale and a big scale. How not only this school, but the entire world is actually going to become a hell of a lot nicer for everyone.
Aaron has a proposal, and then I have a clarifying question. So, Aaron.
I mean, I think this conversation is important, and I just spent time reading some time. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's a process suggestion.
Process suggestion.
is, or it sounds like you had some concern, but it also sounds like you're agreeing with the proposal as is.
I definitely have my hesitations, but I think that if we pass this and then we work on it, then we can start working in the right direction.
Pass it as is, or
Pass it as is. It's tightly written. I mean, it seems pretty solid, and yeah, well, definitely we're going to need to deal with it. We're all around this table, and it does something towards working towards the right direction, and we can all, as a group, figure out how to make it better when we start thinking in this vein.
Okay, so I'm gonna read off the list I have on stack. I don't want to miss anyone. So I have Ari, then Matt, then Sarah, then Kiki, then Vernon, then Maku. Is there anyone else who wants to be on there? All right.
Yeah. I just want to be 100% right now. What Senate needs to pass is a resolution or some sort of, if we want to talk about community accountability, right? What were you saying, Mahmoud? Something community accountability, right?
Yeah, well, right.
What was your language? Yeah.
I don't remember the exact words, but the general sentiment is like a way for us to keep each other accountable so the space is safe.
Yeah. Let's like just remember the context of Oberlin. We operate. Let's remember March 4th of last year. Let's remember Ammonia Lewis. Let's remember Trayvon Martin. Like, let's remember the context in which we operate and pass a resolution about community accountability that centers anti-black and brown racism, queerphobia and transphobia at the center of like what we don't want in this space. This is all fine and well, but like the fact of the matter is that we don't need anything else telling us like, oh, like let's be respectful to each other. That's very basic. What we really need is community accountability. If people don't want to be like, let's just be real. People at this table are afraid of being like pigeonholed into terms of like, you know, white racist, transphobic, sexist, queerphobic. That's the fear at this table. That's why a lot of people don't like to talk about race. Well, there's only two people who, Aaron, you brought up race. I appreciate that today, but nobody ever talks about race at this table, or gender or sex, except for Kiki and I. So if you guys don't want to feel like you're in a space where you're feeling antagonized because of your positionality or because you don't want to be read as transphobic or racist, let's pass a policy and say Oberlin College Student Senate supports a space that is anti-racist. It's specifically anti-racist in the respect that we support Black, Brown, and Asian leadership in this school. Let's pass a resolution that we support respect for queer and non-cis men identified individuals. Like literally, if we like the fact that like we're having a conversation about protecting like the people from feeling pigeonholed into these categories, but nobody wants to come up here and say, guys, like I want to stand against racism. I want to stand against like these like very oppressive things. Like it just seems like we're just going in this like again and again in the wrong directions. We don't even like, if you guys are so scared of being called racist or sexist or whatever, and like so afraid that that's disrespectful, like next plenary, like I'm not even gonna write it. I'm not gonna do it. Y'all write the thing. Come here and say like, as the student senate, we wanna encourage, you know, Black. If you guys want, if anybody on Senate is willing to write that and say that Student Senate encourages and supports Black, Brown, and Asian people of color leadership, queer leadership, women's leadership, leadership from people of diverse, specifically low incomes, then this conversation about respect does not even need to happen, and nobody needs to be afraid of being always characterized as like this cis white man, hetero, that everyone's so scared of being. I'm just saying like that the expressions of those fears are coming out in such interesting and sad ways. And it's sad to me. So, you know, I encourage anyone who's ever felt like disrespected because of their, you know, privileged positionality to like come to plenary next Sunday and write a statement and say like, I want Student Senate to support these kinds of leaderships. Until then, you know, like y'all haven't proving yourselves otherwise, you know, and that's just the sad matter. It's 9:30. I'm not gonna go, but that's all I have to say.
Chris?
I just want to say to that, can we add this to leadership? We want everyone of every color, of everything, not just that. There was something that was missing from that, and I think that's part of why people are afraid maybe to talk about it. I don't know.
That was a clarifying question, so you want to directly respond? There was a clarifying question. Or do you want to give a step?
Oh, can I respond to it?
You can directly respond.
I'm going to respond totally. My name is Miguel. I was at Senator on this, so actually maybe a couple of other folks that were on this side. So, I graduated class of 2013. I think what's really interesting about that is white cis men the encouragement of white cis men in groups on this campus already exists systematically. And so in order to combat diversifying those types of leadership roles, it's a matter of diversifying and being very explicit about what types of leadership we want. And I think, that's something to keep in mind.
Alright, so I unfortunately have 6 a.m. practice tomorrow morning, so I need to leave. Does anyone else want to facilitate the meeting?
If senators are willing to stay, are there any senators that are staying to continue this very fruitful conversation that senators, especially those who are getting up currently, should be in?
Which senators are staying? Raise your hand if you're staying. Is that one person? Okay, quorum. We're not doing plenary.
I like how the idea of getting things done now is not at all concerning anymore.